So with that, I'd like to say welcome, Marcus. How you doing today?
Doing pretty good, actually. And you've already given me some thought starters just from talking about all those topics coming up. So let's get right into it if you're ready, Craig.
Absolutely, I'm ready. Let's go.
Cool. So before I do that, I just want to qualify again, just because we had some new people join. My intention is not to disparage or to put down or anything, anyone here, whether it's Craig or any other guests he mentioned or any of the attendees. The intention is to have a data-based, honest conversation meant to provoke and challenge the things we believe about how we can actually run a successful and sustainable business. Because ultimately, that's what we want, successful and sustainable business. How do we get there? So, for example, you were talking about one of your guests next week, your first guest, just launched their new dental app. That's exciting, everything else. And it's a B2B application. Instantly, my ears perked up because here's a question for you, Craig. Do you believe there is a difference in B2B and B2C?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Um, and overall, there is for a number of reasons. The average sale price from a B2C is usually significantly smaller. The business model is different. The advertising is different. Your marketing, you're usually going after or different. There's 19 channels of traction, and as a B2B business, you're usually using different channels to get at people. The messaging is usually different, and how you build your support team and build your team is different, at
Oh,
least in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. So everything you said, I actually agree with. You talked about how the
Whoa, wait
marketing
a minute. What?
you talk about how the marketing can be different, how the business model is at a different place than, say, a smaller industry. You talked about the support models, everything else. However, the fundamental question wasn't answered, right? You listed a bunch of the different aspects of how you believe B2B and B2C to be different. But here's the, if we simplify things, that's what I want to do today. I'm going to challenge you and say there's actually no difference between B2B and BDC. And the reason for that is because neither of those things exist. It's a label, and a lot of today we're going to talk about labels that we come to believe. It's a label that we have put on things so that we can differentiate ourselves. And what I have found in my experience and the data that we have collected over the years shows that a lot of B2B businesses have a little bit of that sense of, I'm B2B, I don't deal B2C. Whereas a lot of B2Cs are like, oh, one day I want to grow into a B2B. So there's this separation of class in business. But here's what I believe to be the truth of it. At the end of the day, it's P2P. People buy from people. I've never in all my years seen a company buy from a company. It doesn't happen. When I was an employee, I got interviews not because of my amazing skill set, not because of my resume. It was because I knew someone. And that someone said, yeah, I can get you an interview. And I got an interview. And then that's when you could relate to a person. And that person hired me. When I now am a business owner and I want to do business with a company, I can't just simply do business with the company. I'm doing business with a person in the company and establishing that relationship. So for me, it all comes back to people. And we often forget that. So when we get into all the different tactics you're talking about, all the different strategies we're talking about, yes, those are all legitimate and real. But at the end of the day, it's people connecting with people. There can be no separation of class at the very fundamental level.
Absolutely, but it's always people to people. Everything is relationship based, and we can go as far as saying that when you're talking about labels, I like to say I call them boxes. You know, you put people in boxes, you put companies in boxes. I'm talking to people, and it's funny sometimes when they're talking to me, I'll stop and say, "Whoa, whatever box you just put me in, that's your box." Just so you know, it's not my box. You're carrying that box around, and people have a hard time understanding that when they start labeling you and put it, but seriously, I believe there is a difference in a fundamental difference in the company structure, how you do support, how you staff up support. Your delivery model is different. There's a lot of differences in the company itself and how you build it out. But from a marketing point of view, from a relationship point of view, the key fundamentals are the same.
Well, and actually, let's dig deeper there too. So, first of all, boxes. I love that term. In fact, if you guys are looking for a good book for your book club, I would put out "Leadership in Self-Deception" by the Arbinger Institute. Fundamental book on boxes and how we put ourselves and others in boxes, and how it sucks. So that would be the first thing. Secondly, though, you hit some keywords. I'm listening for keywords today. That's what it's all about. One of the keywords is you talked about how you build out your business. And that's the key. It's not a class difference, in my opinion. It's a stages difference. We're all on that same trajectory fundamentally. There's not like a whole separate way of doing it for B2B and a whole separate way of doing it for B2C. It's simply what stage you're at. When you're a startup, for example, as you know, being the startup coach, it's all about those foundations. It's what are the core pieces I need to get to that stage 2, where then people work with me and we focus on getting them to stage 3. Now at stage 3 and beyond, that's when most people would consider it a B2B, because now your core is good, but you're at that point where you have to start adding on a lot of other systems and a lot of other pieces in order to continue to do what you need to grow as a successful and sustainable company. That's the kind of stuff we talked about. So again, I don't think it's a class separation. I think it's a different part of the journey.
I don't know if I agree with you. I'd love some input from everyone else because I still think they're structurally different from how you structure them point of view. The basics are the same. Like you still need to find customers, you still need to validate your idea, you still need to work on partnerships. All the things you do are the same, but how you do them, how you structure your company, how you go about it. You know, if you're B2B, you usually need a much heavier support structure and a much heavier, imagine this, you're Amazon. What kind of relationship do you want to have with,
Yep.
what kind of relationship do you want to have with your customer? Is it, Amazon is purely transactional. I go on, I buy something, and I get off it. I don't want people to call me. I don't need to talk to them about, support or whatever. Every once in a while I have questions. You want to look at the reviews, but you don't have a long-term relationship. But if I'm talking about, a CRM system or an ERP system or something that is going to be pivotal to my company, I want a different relationship with them. I want to know what their inside and outside sales like, what their support structure is like, what their company load is like, how much time they're going to have for me, and how the onboarding process and how do I get to from starting to actually getting 80-90% utilization out of your product. So as a consumer, I don't have those same expectations.
Well, except what's interesting though is you were using Amazon as an example. You're talking about different metrics, not different processes and systems. Because to your point, I guarantee you that Amazon has a world-class support system for consumers. I mean, to refund a product on Amazon is so easy for the consumer, but the amount of support systems that are in place for B2C aspect is phenomenal. Now, I turn it around. You look at the B2B component, as you're calling it, for Amazon, for the different vendors it has, for the different relationships it develops. Again, it still has a high level of support, the same as it did for B2C, hence why I'm saying they're fundamentally not different. It's what are the metrics and what are the steps within those processes that can change. So to your earlier point about how, yeah, a lot of the pieces are the same, human resources, marketing, sales, at the end of the day, it is the same. It's the metrics that we're measuring. It's either customer journey when you're doing like front facing like we talked about, or vendor journey is still technically customer journey depending on where you've positioned yourself, right? In the case of Amazon, the front end user who's buying the product is a customer and the vendor is also a customer, and both of those relationships are equally critical. If you've got all this product and no one to buy it, you failed. If you have all of these people and no product to supply them, you failed. So again, there's inherently no difference. It's all about those people relationships. If your vendors don't enjoy working with you, you can't satisfy your customers, and that doesn't matter what type of business you have.
Yeah, but that's an unfair example only because Amazon's a two-sided business and you are comparing apples to oranges in the same line. You say, "Oh, I'm talking to vendors and talk."
Hey, give me an apples to apples.
Well, I mean,
That
I
was your
think,
example, so I'm just jumping on
yeah,
it.
I'm trying to think because it's a two-sided marketplace. Does anybody in the chat room have an example of a business that is a B2C business that's a one-sided marketplace where they just worrying about their customers?
I mean, some people could say Shopify as an example, right? People create a Shopify store and it's strictly for people to buy from.
Yeah, but Shopify is a B2B and B2C because it's a two-sided marketplace as well. So it's not a good example when you're talking about that because exactly they have it's the same for them because as a two-sided marketplace they have to build both structures. They have to build the consumer facing support structure and do consumer facing marketing and do consumer based outreach and all that kind of stuff and the vendor stuff. And those are completely not always the same processes.
No,
Um,
different processes. That's what I'm saying. The details are different. I absolutely agree with you, 100%. In fact, even the fact that we're having this discussion still is to demonstrate the power of labels.
yep.
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter what we call the labels, B2B, B2C, P2P, could be human to human, H to H. It doesn't matter because to the point of your second guess, we're talking about, client avatars and converting social media. How do you get people on social media to go from a one-way conversation where you're just giving them content to a two-way conversation where you're engaging them in your CRM, for example, and then nurturing it into some type of longer-term relationship. But at the end of the day, all of these examples so far that you gave that your guests are coming with is all about human relationship. That's the driving factor in every business. If you suck at relationships, then you're going to suck at business, is what it comes down to.
So let me ask a question. I know what Paul's business is. I don't know what these other people in the chat room's businesses are. But Paul, would you consider yourself a B2C business or a B2B business? Just out of curiosity. Um, and we'll wait for him to throw that in the chat room or put his hand up or whatnot. Again, if you want to jump in on the conversation and give us any opinion or even give us some discussion points, throw them in the chat room Q&A or put your hand up. And if you put your hand up, that indicates we'll let you go live with the mic and your camera if you're so inclined. So just be aware of that.
Right. But let's look at examples too, even in a B2B. So let's say you have one company and you've got a bunch of different purchasers. Good business practice indicates that you have a single account manager to manage that relationship. So when you call up that other company to buy from or email them or whatever it is the process is, you expect to be dealing with the same person. Why? Because you've developed relationship with that person. You cannot simply, well, maybe you could, maybe you can just go to that vendor's website, place your product, and away you go. But in order to get access like that in the first place, you had to go through a process to establish credibility, to have some type of connection with them on a human level. That's always the way it goes. Even with your banks. I mean, we could technically just get pre-approved for mortgages, but at the end of the day, you have to sit down and talk with somebody because there's always someone that has to connect with you. And that's what we want. Even in project management, that's what we want. You could call and it's like, look at customer service, back to your example. If every single time I call a company, and it depends on the company, I suppose, if I'm being honest, if I'm calling a company and I get a single different person every time, the data shows like Amazon, Bell Canada, any of these big service providers, when you're dealing with a different person every single time, the happiness tends to be lower than when you have that single customer relationship. I see John's putting his hand up and Paul is also answering us. So Paul
Yeah.
says, we started out B2C as a tenant on our planned B2B platform. It can get confusing when I'm pitching sometimes. My background was B2B and I deliberately wanted to get into B2C. Okay. So that's interesting. And John has just gotten his ability to be revoked from the chat.
Oh yeah, did you do that or?
No, I haven't removed him, but given his questions, I don't think we're really going to keep him in here.
Yeah, I'm just not
No
trying to.
problemo.
I've never had to do that before, so I'm trying to
Yeah,
figure
I've
that
had
out.
people hijack these sometimes, and you can see that John is attempting to do so. Um,
Absolutely.
but in the meantime, what I'll do is I'm going to talk with Paul. So Paul, it would be great to have a chat more so than the text if you're willing to come on. If not, that's okay. Craig, you said you know what his business is. What is his business?
Oh, look at all this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're busy with that.
Yeah. I'm busy trying to get rid of our
Yep, to get rid of our
spam
one
guest.
spammer, no problem.
He keeps coming
Um,
in. There's 20 of them now.
yeah, so what I would do is quickly set up a waiting room if you can, and then that way you can only admit the correct people in. Cool.
That's
So often, again, B2B, I'll give my own example since I actually don't know what it is you do. Oh, category, food and drink delivery. Okay, so originally you were doing B2B, so you were providing as like to wholesalers and things like that, or to businesses. And then now you wanted to switch over to B2C, where you're going straight to the end user. So like pre-planned meals or something like that, delivering food, groceries, that kind of thing. So again, there can be different motivations for why we would want to do that, but even still, let's go back to that point about the label, because I'm just warming us up for the main conversation topic still. When we go back to the different labels, the idea was is that when you were doing the B2B, when you were delivering to companies, you probably did develop relationships with each of those customers. They would come to expect you. You would see the same people. And as you develop relationships, the orders probably went up because they were continually happy with the service, and that's how you get your referrals. That's how you get good reviews, is by developing the relationships. Now, when you move over to end users, if you've done that already, have you seen that same level of relationship development, right? Are you getting a lot of one-off customers when you're going to end users, or are you developing those same types of relationships, nurturing them, getting the same type of high reviews and the same type of referrals? What is the data behind it, Paul? That's where everything's going to fall back to me for today. How are you measuring it? Because if we're not measuring it at the end of the day, and this is some people say it's a cop-out answer. It really isn't. I have to fall back to this. If you don't have data to support the statement, you're guessing. You think you know, but you may not know. And it happens to us. We almost went out of business because we weren't tracking data properly. So it's so critical to have data to really be the foundation of where we speak our story from. I see Paul's with us now, so I'll shut up for a sec.
Welcome, Paul.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, hang on. Let me just put the earbuds on so I don't feedback here. But before, like when I had it was a different company when I was B2B, and we sold subscriptions to a data service. So it was like in the news business. It was sports data. So people subscribe to up-to-date sports results and other services. We helped them build their applications. So, and I was mostly in charge of just making sure operations and producing some of the products. But I pretty much knew all my clients. Like I didn't have to make any guesses about them. I could just call up and say, hey, are they, we had them in a IRC chat, and I heard from them every day. I knew what they wanted. I knew who they were. There's no mystery to it. And they paid, the subscription fees of, a minimum, 1,000 a month up to 10,000 a month with our bigger clients. Can you guys say something just so I can test my audio reception?
Yeah, we're still here listening.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And so, and that's a big difference that I'm doing this. I exited that company just because I wanted to start something new and something different, and wanted to get into more of the product side and different challenges. And with B2C, it's very difficult to, when we're just like getting a small, sometimes even one-off purchases, and I don't know much about them. I don't know what they're doing. Like, we're just making discoveries all the time about what, how our service is screwing up, for example. I can't go up, I can't look over people's shoulders. I don't know who they are. And so that's for me is a big difference. I also have to tell myself that I don't need to panic when we're maybe losing a company. That meant, losing, like tens of thousands of dollars a year in revenue. Whereas if I lose one customer that's only spending 30, I mean, they could be a long-term lifetime customer, but it's not, I don't have to like go full alarm bells when I'm losing them. As opposed to when B2C, when it was thousands of bucks. Now I should take, that's just, I have to always telling myself to calm down. It's okay. Like if there's 100 people and you lose one of them, you still got 99 customers. Whereas the B2B company I was with, we didn't even have 99 customers and we were doing fine. We had about 20 or 30. So.
Okay. So some key differences there. Great. I love some of those things you mentioned. So let's talk about some of the similarities first. So you knew the customers you dealt with, you were still dealing with people. whether it was B2B or B2C. So that one point still seems valid. However, you're right. You're playing with a lot bigger risk in B2B because you've only got a few customers that have a much larger lifetime client value, and they're bringing in a bigger portion of your overall gross revenue for the year. Whereas when you're dealing with B2C, you have to go for a higher volume because you need to have a lot more customers to come even close to generating that. Now, imagine then if instead of focusing on the difference between B2B and B2C, and this isn't accusations, this is just exploration. When you were in B2B, having all the metrics in place of why was this working from a relationship point of view? Why do they keep coming back? Why do they keep ordering? Is it strictly because of the product? Sure, but why do they order from me? What are the metrics we can measure? Now imagine bringing that from B2B to your B2C. So now you can start introducing things to increase your lifetime client value, the chances of repeating. You can work on follow-up systems and nurture campaigns. You can put referral programs in place instead of just doing what a lot of people tend to do in B2C, which is slap sales and discounts on things, which actually devalues your proposition overall. So there's a lot of things you can do when we take that P2P approach, that human to human, people to people approach. So just to put that out there for you, because I'm sure like with the B2B, you were really amazing at it, but it comes back to the data. We always have to measure why we're amazing at it.
And I'd like to welcome Will Greenblatt to the conversation. Welcome, Will.
Hi.
Hey, Will.
Nice to be with you, Marcus, and
good to see you
Greg.
today.
Yeah.
And do you remember Paul? He's been out to a few times.
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
right.
You were talking to him at one of our investor speed dating events at Startup Drinks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think I spoke with you. Is that right, Paul?
Yep.
Yeah. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. Yes.
That just brings them up to the speed in the conversation.
Yeah. No, nice to be here with you.
So the challenge here, I guess, Paul, is what I'm wanting to do, just to bring you up to speed, Will, is we're just challenging all kinds of things today. So we're going back to facts versus story, and we're eventually building up to the big one, which is how scaling up and growing can actually kill your business. That's where we're going to get up to, but I don't want to start there. I want people to understand I'm not attacking anyone. I'm not out to be some outlier that just has these crazy thoughts, but I want to show how when we start to look at our data and understand it, it can actually influence the way we conduct our relationships with people, right? So again, Paul, in your case, what are your mechanisms for gaining feedback? How do you find out? Like you say, you're only starting to understand your customers, you're finding out things about them today. What are you doing for that? Are you doing surveys? Are you doing giveaways? Or like, how are you figuring out who your ideal client is and how are you nurturing them?
Oh, we know it was sort of a digital transformation play. It was a business that wasn't digitized at all, going for 30 years. And then basically we're trying to digitize it and replicate it outside the local market and hopefully across Canada and beyond. And so, there's a lot of knowledge about how that business runs, a lot of domain knowledge there. And we're under a budget. We don't have any great marketing ideas at this point because the marketing is one of our weaknesses, but I know how to build applications. And, but the one thing we just did was we started, basically all of us founders, because this is our scaling issues, and that's why I'm here, is, we're doing in-person customer support. We put, having trouble, phone us, because we're trying to get people to order online, something that they're traditionally used to calling in for. Right. And so we added a phone number on there. So now we're actually talking to customers and finding out that it's quite difficult to get them to change their behavior. And so we realized that, okay, so they're used to doing things a certain way, and it would be easier to do it the old-fashioned way. We're trying to force them to do it in a different way. So we've got to do something where we got to make them really happy doing it the new way. Because once they do it that way, and we get it to them fast, and we get it to them cheaper, then we've converted them. We've convinced them, and we've got a lifetime returning customer. It's getting them to do it in that manner that is the challenge, and we've got to make sure that the application itself just holds their hand through it, and makes it. And it has to be so finely optimized to get there. And so anything, and just basically it's like, because we're at the stage now where it's product market fit. Like I don't even want to spend any money on marketing because I don't even know how technically we scale right now, to be honest. And we're just discovering these things now.
So a couple of things there, if I may, Paul, is one, change management of any type can be really scary for people. Well, that's what we do for a living. And one of my favorite things, and I always like to break the ice with people, is like, everyone loves the idea of change, just don't start with me. Right? None of us want to be change, but we want to see change. And often what happens when we're introducing new systems, which is perfect for what you're saying, when we're introducing new systems, often what we do is we leave the existing clients on the system they're in, and we introduce new systems to the new clients. And eventually that transition plan, we give like a grace period, say of a year. I don't know what it would be for your business offhand, but you figure out what a good grace period would be. And you slowly, and I know this might sound cold, but I'm being a business guy here. You can slowly transition out old clients that want to do things the old way, because the fewer clients you have doing it the old way, the more expensive it will become to maintain the old way. And as you keep bringing on more customers in the new way, which is automated and optimized and profitable, then this becomes not even a talking point anymore. Right? So those are some things to consider is how do you get more of your new customers onto your system that you want, your application, and what can you do? Yes, to definitely support those existing clients, but how do you get them to want to try the new way? Right? How do you handhold them, as you said, through the new way and reward them for that? And that's where you do get into marketing sometimes, but that's a separate conversation. So I love that you're not just taking blind steps and listening to people so that you can scale up. That's one of the phrases I want to talk about today. I hate that phrase. But something I'll offer you, if I may. Do you have $100 in 3 days?
Sorry?
Do you have $100 in 3 days?
$100 in 3 days.
Yeah.
And 3 days.
And 3 days. You need both. You need the money and you need the 3 days. If you have that, and this applies to everybody here, and Craig, he's like, where is this going? So
I know where it's going. Go ahead.
One of my favorite things to debunk is everyone talks about lead gen. How do I get more leads? And who's reputable to buy leads from? And people charge thousands of dollars for lead lists, and we all have horror stories. I spent $2,000 when I started out on a lead list because I was told buy leads, and half of them bounced back. They were useless leads, and I was like, never again. And it was only 3 years ago that I discovered what I'm going to tell everybody that's listening right now. And this is an amazing, amazing thing, especially for someone like you, Paul, that has all this existing data and wants to duplicate this across Canada. So please, if you have any questions about this process, let me know, okay?
Yep.
Here's the process.
Yep.
Get into a buy leads mindset. It's okay to buy leads. Where do you buy leads from? Facebook. What? I didn't know I could buy leads from Facebook. You absolutely can. If you take that data, just the very base data you have right now, let's say you have the neighborhoods of where most of your customers are, or the postal code of where most of your customers are. All you need to do for this is what I call the ideal client avatar done for you by Facebook. Spend $100 lifetime on an ad, and it's a 3-day ad. The only parameter you need to put in is postal code for where you find most of your customers from your existing database. After that 3 days, when that ad is closed, you can go back, you'll find gender specifics, you'll find age specifics, what platform they're on, what device they're on. You will have, like, there's over 10,000 data points in Facebook. So instead of going through all these exercises that we get sold on, and again, no offense to Craig or anyone else, I teach client avatar for Pete's sake, right? Everyone wants to know who their ideal client avatar is, but for $100 in 3 days, you can have Facebook tell you who your client avatar is. And that's the first step in marketing. Everything that you need to know is available to you in that short time frame with that low spend. Then find yourself a marketing partner. I would recommend a performance-based marketing partner. And what that means is they will front all the labor costs, and it'll be like a 3-month term. Every quarter, at the end of that quarter, you will pay them a percentage based on the revenue generated from the leads provided, right? There's very few performance-based marketing companies in the GTA, but it's a wonderful model. So you would still have to pay for your ad spend, but you wouldn't pay for any of the labor costs. So you can get the most bang for your buck, but it's high risk for those companies, which is why you don't find too many of them.
Hey, Paul, does that approach sound familiar? The $100 Facebook ads?
I've heard similar things from you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome.
I
Okay.
just wanted to be, it's like, no offense to Craig, but yeah, this is exactly the type of stuff we teach. And I know, Will, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah,
So go
please
ahead.
do, Will. I love hearing it.
Sorry, and not to cut anyone off. There was just a point that Paul brought up about how to get your old clients onto the new platform and how much handholding they require. I just wanted to know, Paul, if you have video content out there explaining any of these sticking points that you've come across for your customers.
Well, yeah, because one of the things we thought of was even just starting cheap, just a video of how to use the app. You know, here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Part of the confusing thing is the simplicity of it. It kind of offends people's expectations about e-commerce. They're thinking, where do I put my credit card in? Where's the shopping cart and all that? No, it's dead simple. Place your order, driver comes, you pay the driver, and in a way, it's there's two things here. We're trying to get them to stop phoning in for the order, but we're also presenting them with an e-commerce flow that is also much, much simpler than they're used to. So, and so I was thinking, okay, well, it's really simple. It's really easy. Don't worry. Here's how you do it. And there's a video just showing, you know, in here, and voila, you're done. So yeah, I have considered that. And that's at the very cheap end, like minimal, and maybe progressing from there to a better, higher level of professional.
Yeah, there's a lot of stats around the efficacy of video content, especially explainer stuff. There's a lot of statistics backing up how much that helps customers make purchasing decisions. So there's some pretty interesting studies from WizOwl and from HubSpot about the efficacy of not only video content marketing, but also using video to support your kind of product and your product ecosystem. So I would say that if there are some problems with getting old customers into a new way of doing things, consider making lots of strategy-based video content, figuring out where they're going to come across it and what stage they are in the sort of learning process, and realizing that people really do need their hands held for them when it comes to this sort of stuff. Like, they want to know exactly where their mouse goes and where they click what, and then what that takes them to, and then where they input what info. So, you know, making videos with like Loom or Screencast with your face there, saying, hey, I'm here, I'm going to hold your, I'm going to help you through this, and then walk you through, this is what we do, with some energy in your voice, some, you know, that can really, really be helpful. I just wanted to throw that in there. Well, I
completely agree with Will. Go with Loom, loom.com, screencast, but loom.com, so easy.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right on so many things. Definitely have your face in there. This goes back to that whole relationship thing. You want to talk data and statistics and marketing, ads and everything else. They outperform 10-1 when there's that human face and connection. So very important to have that as well, like he said. And yeah, just make short little videos. You mentioned, you know, to start, and then we'll get into more professional videos. No, why? You don't need to. People actually relate. Like, you look at how social platforms have transformed, things like TikTok, Instagram, all of these. People want real. They want what's called relatability. So be relatable. Don't be some high professional type of photo shoot. Be relatable to people. And maybe even think about doing something like this once a week at a standing date and time for the next 3 months or something, and people can just drop in and email them to remind them that, hey, by the way, we're going to do this, you know, open platform where you can come in, ask your questions, because they may find there's other customers that have the same questions, and it takes away that fear. It takes away that self-condemnation that, oh, I should be able to figure this out or know how to do it myself. So again, it goes back to that human connection that Craig keeps attempting to disprove unsuccessfully.
Yeah, and I don't want to stick to this question for too long, but that also might work for your drivers on the other side, is having those regular meetings, have discussion about what's working, business support and all that kind of stuff. So if you have a business support network for them, it might be easier for drivers to be more profitable and get more of them on. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that we continue to talk about questions and not get too far off topic.
Yeah, it's not one-on-one coaching for Paul today, sorry. Okay, so let's get to the main event. So the main event was how scaling up can kill your business. literally can kill your business. Now, there are 5, and these are data proven, there are 5 major barriers to growing your business, to scaling up from wherever you are to the next level. I'm not going to go into all the different stages that Craig and I were talking about a little bit earlier, but here's the 5 areas. The first is leadership. And leadership is a failure to recognize internal talent and promote it, or to be able to hire. You don't have the right processes in place, the core values in place, the top grading systems in place, the resource pool to even choose from. That is the very first barrier to business, is leadership. And that's a critical one. The second one is a scalable infrastructure, right? And this is actually the one I get most frustrated, well, second most frustrated at, but out of the 5, this is the second most frustrating, is when we start out, it's so much manual effort. We are pretty much a jack of all trades doing everything, and we find a couple of people to come along and they'll do everything. And now we're all doing everything and we're brute forcing our way to success. We hire Craig, we hire Will, we hire me, we're spending money, we're hoping to make some money, but we know it's all for the sake of growth. I was with a potential client today for one of our mentoring programs, and they said to me, listen, I'm willing to invest in your program for the next year, even if I don't make any money. I was like, well, then you're not getting into the program, because that's not the point, right? We don't want you to be breaking even or sinking the ship as you scale. So you have to have a scalable infrastructure. What does that mean? To what we were talking about with Paul, for example, is how can he automate some of this stuff? How can he put systems in place so that this support can become automatic, not to the point where we lose that human connection, but where we can eliminate 90% of the common questions and 10% real human connection to deal with the rest. So scalability is huge. Here's the easiest example, CRMs. If you don't know what that is, customer relationship management, right? Most people, like, what is the, okay, so our internal data shows that 45% of prospects are lost if we don't respond within 24 hours. That's a huge number, and that's from our own internal data set. Okay? And we're pretty good at following up, but when we don't, almost half our customers have moved on. So what does that mean? It means that someone on my team was not able to manually get back to them in time. That's an old stat from when we used to do that. So now, of course, everything is automated. Follow-ups are automated. And if you ever read Google's Zero Moment of Truth, it talks about this concept of 7-11-4, which isn't for today, but the idea is you have to get to them in different ways. So we have automated email sequences, we have text sequences, we experimented with robocalling late last year and got away from it, but now we have real people making calls because people don't tend to like robocalling. So having all of these systems in place is a lot more efficient, and it converts a lot higher. So that's your second barrier, and it frustrates me that people want to keep brute forcing, because there comes a point when you can't wing it anymore. And if you don't have those scalable systems in place, you aren't going to scale no matter how much money you throw at it. Okay. Third is, and Paul knows this one, is you need to have an effective marketing strategy. This is why marketers rule the world, and this is why I get so frustrated with them. That thing we talked about earlier with performance-based marketing, you would assume if it's such a critical part of building a business that marketers would put their money where their mouth is and have some type of guarantee. But all of us as business owners, the biggest fear is, well, what are they really promising to deliver? So any marketing you deal with, make sure that there are hard deliverables. If there's not, then you're running the risk of throwing money away. Okay. The fourth one, what is the fourth one? Oh, the fourth one is innovation. What worked a year ago is not going to work today. Look at the world we're in with COVID right now. In the last 3 months, we have helped 250 businesses pivot so that they can continue to make money, because what they were doing suddenly evaporated overnight. It no longer worked, and they were at risk of losing it all because they hadn't built up these things we talked about yet. Okay, so it's important that you stay innovative and relevant. And then the final one, and this is the one that is really the core of today's topic. The final one is a sustainable business model. If you have to keep throwing money at your business, it's going to die. When I hear, and this isn't meant to be cold, but all of these people, all these small business owners saying the government hasn't been doing enough with CERB and these loans that are available and everything else because, you know, they need help now. To me, that shows that they did not have a sustainable business model. They were living check to check. They had a little bit of money in the bank account, but they didn't understand how cash flow works. So there's a whole industry out there that is telling you you need to scale up. There's a whole industry out there that is telling you you need to get to that next level. And they're saying grow and grow and grow and sales and marketing and revenue. I know companies operating, like I believe Amazon up until recently still hasn't turned a profit, right? Jeff Bezos made a ton of money, but his company still hasn't. So there's lots of companies running at a negative because they don't understand the power of profitability. So always look at these 5 barriers, and out of the 2 the most, again, it's got to be systems and it's got to be cash flow. If people are telling you to grow and scale and sell and market, I mean, if I sold 500 things today for you, Paul, because I'm actually pretty good at sales, do you have the ability to deliver 500 things to your customers today? Maybe, maybe not. So we have to have things in place to be able to accommodate these other front-facing efforts. And people always lose sight of that. Without having solid profitability, if you attempt to grow, it will threaten to destroy your business. That's the premise of the conversation today. So I'm going to zip it for a second. We got Will, we got Craig. I can tell he's chomping at the bit. So let's open up the discussion on this premise.
Why don't you start, Will?
That was fantastic, Marcus. Really, really, yeah, great stuff. I love the 7-11-4 thing too. For anyone listening, it's basically, remind me, it's that they need to spend 7 hours with your content.
Yeah, 7 hours of content.
11 interactions.
11, yeah, in 4 locations.
In 4 locations. So
for those looking, it's called Google's Zero Moment of Truth.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting way of thinking about how your customers or prospects are coming across you, and what they have to really have, how much time they have to have spent with you and your ideas before they're ready to buy from you. And yeah, it's very powerful. And I hope what it does, the more you learn about it, is convince you to make more content and push your ideas out there. And again, as Marcus said, have your face and your voice in these ideas. Those animated videos, they do okay as well, but I'm personally of the belief that, like, yeah, people facing founders and talking to real human beings is always better. And from what I've been reading too, we're entering into an age of, like, the collaboration economy. People want to work with people. They don't want to just have some faceless corporation take their money and do something for them. There was something that I wanted to mention around the are you ready to scale up? Like, instead of worrying about how you can, worrying about if you're ready. Somebody who's been a colleague and mentor of mine, his name's Nswani Bafo, and he always says, if you were to blow up tomorrow, do you have the team in place to handle that? And every time he says that, and I come across this in his different content, or when he says it in person, or I've talked with events, and I'm always like, because I think about my own business, and I realize I don't. Like, if I were to go on, let's say, Joe Rogan's podcast, which has 4 million subscribers or something like that, who's got one of the hugest platforms, and I were to say, hey, this is what I do, I'm this kind of coach, I couldn't handle that because of all the orders and prospects that would come in. I don't have the processes in place to do that. So yeah, I think it's really, really important that you think about getting some sustainable processes in place. I don't know if any of your philosophies, or some of them, come from Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, Marcus.
Oh yeah, I've done some work with Vern, also done some work with Gino Wickman as well. So none of these things are mine. I'm not going to take credit for them, but not enough people understand what those philosophies are and why they matter.
Right. And yeah, and I would say I've read both Scaling Up by Vern Harnish and Traction, I think it is by Gino Wickman. Yes.
Yeah,
and
he's
so
the EOS founder, the Entrepreneur Operating System. Yeah.
And I've had trouble implementing a lot of those because I just, you get caught up in running, your business. But from a philosophical standpoint, both those reads are really helpful to anyone listening. Traction by Gino Wickman, maybe we can write it in the chats, but they're really good at understanding what processes you need to be ready to scale up and how you can.
I got to challenge you there though, Will. I know you have more to say, but it can't just be philosophical, right? To your point, having trouble implementing them, that is a foundational reason why you need to implement them.
Right.
So, continue on, my friend.
No, that's great. That's really all I wanted to say, was just recommend those 2 books. But of course, I found personally that dedicating enough hours of your week into setting these processes is really, really valuable. And it can be very easy to get caught in reacting to emails and chasing leads and all that sort of stuff. But saying, like, okay, I'm going to meet with my team and say, okay, what do we do every time an inbound lead happens? What do we do every time an order is requested? What do we do every time somebody says, can you tell me more about your services? And what are the physical documents that we can send to them? And do we have those? Does everybody on our team have access to those? Do they know where to look when they have a request? If they don't, do we have a video asset which shares with our organization what that process is? And so that can be a really, really effective thing to spend your time on, because it's like loading up work on the front end so that later on those processes work smoothly. And I think that's really important. Even if you're not going to scale, even if you just want to stay in a lifestyle boutique startup and you don't want to get too big, you just want to, you know.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, I love what you just said, because it's not about scaling. It's about sustainability. It's about what is your success. I'll actually share, when we started out and got to those pains of growth, Will, I actually went to wish.com and bought an $8 USB recorder pen, and it just stayed on my shirt, and I would click it and narrate my day. It was ridiculous. I'd be like,
right.
And then I did that, and I would just narrate my day. And when it was all done, I would send it up to rev.com, rev.com, and they transcribe audio into text. So now I had some SOPs, standard operating procedures. I had some documents in place that we could then start to build systems off of, right? So it was, for us, it was, I was like where you are, I don't want to have to spend dedicated time because I'm too busy trying to do the work, right? So I started narrating as I did the work, and then I would have someone else, and they're so affordable that it made sense just to spend that little bit of money.
That's
and
brilliant.
Then boom, there we are. So yeah, but that's it. It's like, it's a whatever it takes attitude to get ahead. And I guess that's the point. Will really nailed it on the head. The entire point is that when we chase revenue, there's never enough, right? But the idea is profitability. Here's a couple of fun Stats Canada stats for everybody from 2018. That's the most recent, up-to-date, accurate stats from Stats Canada for business. So one of them is that 98% of all businesses in Canada are small businesses, SMEs, small to medium enterprise. And out of that 98%, only 3% of them will ever make more than $1 million a year. The rest are under that, and the corresponding stat was 2 weeks away from bankruptcy. And we've seen that happen in COVID, right? People do not have the funds. And that's because, again, understanding the difference between revenue and profit. The other fun stat, which I find really, really fascinating and more relevant to the conversation, is if you can increase your profitability by that same 3%, ironically, if you can increase your net profitability in life, like whether it's your personal finances or your business finances, that is the same as a 10% increase in revenue, gross revenue. That's crazy to me. What that means is if I'm making $100,000 a year in sales, and I'm chasing sales and wanting more sales and wanting more marketing so that I can have a 10% increase and get that extra 10,000 revenue, if I could figure out how to spend less time on my internal costs, if I could reduce vendor costs, if I could reduce human resource costs, if I could streamline with systems by 2%, or sorry, 3%, it's the same. And that's where this whole concept of lean operations comes in, because it's not always about just grow, 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 grow. It's about how do I streamline and optimize what I already have. And of course, the logic behind this makes sense, because if I can streamline what I already have, then that frees up cash flow. And if I can free up more cash flow, now I have money to do some of that performance-based marketing. Now I have money to look into CRMs and get someone to automate it. I have money to hire mentors like Craig and Will. So focus not on scaling and scaling and scaling. And when you go to seminars, or even before you go to seminars, if everyone's like, you know, I'll get you to the next level. What does that even mean? What is the next level? You know what your next level is, right? Like we're a relatively smallish shop. We hover around 15 staff. I don't want to be a $50 million a year company. Right now, everyone's happy. I provide for my people, and we don't have that stress of being 2 weeks away from being broke, because we continue. We have a process that automatically starts to keep building our profitability without us doing anything. It just keeps reinvesting in itself, and the profitability grows and grows and grows. When you take away that type of stress, the very thing we all say we can take away from our customer, it's almost, I call it a paradox of purpose. right? We're out there talking about how we'll save people time and stress and money. And yet most of us, myself included at times, are guilty of being super stressed with not enough time and not enough money. So stop focusing on all these different things to help you grow and start looking at what you already have and how to maximize it.
Yeah, at early stages, startups are, and entrepreneurs are working in their business, not on their business. So there's a natural transition for that, right? Once you start getting your customers and start getting your sales and have a product or service or whatnot, as soon as you can, you need to start working on your business and not in your business.
Can't stand that phrase, Craig.
Well, then tell me why you can't stand that phrase and what you prefer.
When I met Michael Gerber, because I love that. I love the whole concept, the E-Myth Revisited, amazing book, agree with so much of it. The one thing I told him to his face, because that time when I met him at a big event that I paid to go to because I needed to learn how to get to the next level, see the irony there? When I looked at him, I said, here's the thing. I liked how you said it. It's a transition, but the truth is you will never get to a point where you're only ever working on your business. Like I guarantee you, even to this day, Jeff Bezos, richest man in the world, if someone sits down with $100 million contract for him as a vendor, he's signing that and closing that himself. You never get away from having to do some of the work. And the way that is positioned is what I disagree with. It's positioned that if you work hard enough and do all these things, then eventually you won't have to do anything. And that never happens. So I think it's really critical and clear for people to understand what you said, Craig, that it's a transition, but it's never a 0 to 100 transition, ever. It simply doesn't work like that in reality. And that's what I said to him. And then he said, I'm sorry, who are you? But that's a whole other conversation.
But yeah, go ahead, Will.
Well, I was just going to say there's an interesting way of putting it that I learned from Dent Global, who have a lot of really interesting things around.
Mike, are you talking about Mike or Daniel?
Mike.
I love Mike.
Yeah, Mike's fantastic, and he's such a great. Right now, I'm going through their accelerator program, and Mike is like the best. Yeah, it's really been fantastic, and what Mike talks a lot about is vital work versus functional work. Mm-hmm. So that maybe is a way of thinking about it as well, is functional work being very much the operations, the accounting, the marketing, the sales calls, the sort of stuff that keeps the engine running. But the vital work being like, innovation and thinking about where you can go, thinking about new products, thinking about really high level strategies and making those really big partnerships that you can leverage their networks from. And so kind of as the founders trying to step away from the everyday, which is very very functional stuff that needs to happen, but going into the more vital stuff that can help your company. Yeah. Which it doesn't have to be growth for its own sake, but will allow it to be more sustainable and more profitable.
Well, and it's the same concept then, different words, back to the labels thing. However, I want you to tell Mike, Marcus asked him this, how often do you think when you're doing your vital work, do you still step in for the functional? Because it happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's, sorry, Craig, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that you never stop working in the business because it usually, because it's your business. But as you said, at some point you've got to start figuring out some standard operating procedures. So what I'm doing right now, like training and developing courses and curriculum and all that stuff, that's great. But when I'm doing that, I'm not reaching out and creating partnerships. I'm not figuring out strategies for things. I'm not training other people to do the work so they can do that, the time-consuming stuff. So exactly what you're saying, what I'm saying, and it's never a full transition one way or the other. Right. But sometimes people are too busy to work on the business. So you need to start figuring out, well, wait a minute, that's great, but how much of that do you really need to be doing? What are the core parts of your business? What's your standard operating procedure? How do you train people up? How do you onboard people to do this work? So, that you can start working on growing and scaling and putting all these things in place that you need to, so you don't blow up when some influencer mentions you or something happens and you just can't continue.
Right. Well, and I get it. And I also know Michael Gerber gets this. Obviously, it's the way the book is presented, right? The book is presented that it's a one-time transition and then you're free from that functional day-to-day in your business work. And we all know that's just not how it works. So it's the myth that gets sold, which is why I think it's funny that it's called the E-myth. But anyway, to your point though, here's a really other foundational thing. And I wonder how many of us have done this, because it was something I only did in my second business because I'd never learned about it. And I had a mentor teach me something amazing. When you start your business, start not with a business plan or anything else, start with your exit strategy. Because if you don't know what you're ultimately working towards, how are you going to get there? Right? So it's not about, when you say scaling, again, back to where I'm so irritated and why I wanted this call today is because people often scale for the sake of scaling. Like, what's the end goal, right? Are you waiting to hit that 10 million in revenue? But again, 10 million revenue could be 8 million in debt. It could be 12 million in debt. You have no idea. So you have to set metrics, data. Again, how do you track it? Because when you set the end goal, you can reverse engineer it to starting from day one, here's what we need to do, and then measure whether you're on track or not on track. And I know you're smiling because you guys both learn this stuff, teach this stuff. I get it. It's simple concepts like we talked about earlier, Will. The philosophies make sense. How do you actually do it? And you need to start doing it.
Yeah, and I approach it slightly differently, and Will, heard me say this several times, but, when you're starting your company, when you start my incubator program, and when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, what we start with, imagine, what does success look like to you? What is this business in 5 years, 10 years that you're building? Are you on the beach and just checking your email? Or do you have 1,000 employees and you're in the heat of it? Are you selling? Are you the architect? Are you the developer? Like, what role do you see yourself in the company, and what does this company look like? And we start there. Especially because you really need to think about that, because I just want to sell this product. Okay, great, but we need to understand what type of business we're building, what success looks like to you. Are we going to be scaling globally, or are you happy with a $250,000 business with 2 employees or whatnot? So it's a question of figuring that out and going from there. It's just slightly different approach, but it's the same destination.
It is, but I'd also say, I believe it has to be taken one step further, Craig, right? So I love visions, I love dreams, I love BHAGs, I love all that stuff, picturing the beach, that's all the emotional motivation and everything else. This is where you want to be. I think the critical step, since we're talking about cash flow today, is what does that cost, right? And you can look that up on Google. You can find what the actual costs are surrounding what that dream is, and then break it down into, okay, here's my 1 year then. If it's a 5-year goal, then by 1 year, I need to make this divided by 5 or whatever, right? Or if you're going to use a scaling curve, like an exponential curve, whatever.
Absolutely.
And then you can drive it right back to quarterly goals and weekly goals and daily goals. And now it's plain and simple what the path is in a very detailed, factual way. And I'm not saying, a lot of people think I'm a robot because I'm always on about data and numbers and everything else. And I just want to tell people why really quick. I am the most emotional, passionate person you will ever meet, if you didn't know that yet. I have huge dreams. I have huge heart. I have huge passions. And if it was up to me, I'd be living in the clouds every single day. That's why I'm so focused on the numbers, because it's the thing I am the worst at. So I had to learn that to ground me so that I could take all of those other skills I have and make sure that they made sense with the data. Because if it doesn't, then what's the point? So I just wanted to get that across to people, because I really harp on metrics a lot.
Absolutely, and I'm going to toss this to Will in a second. But one of the things I teach, especially at pitching, we work with generally different stages of startups, so I approach this differently. Like, I'm working mostly with very early stage startups who are just trying to figure out their product market fit and all that kind of stuff before. So we approach it slightly different, but it's one of the key essentials when I'm talking about pitching and getting your story right is what's your exit strategy? What's your plan? So that comes slightly later in the discussion, but it's a natural follow-up discussion to what does this business look like in 5 years, right? And then you can have those following discussions. And because people are looking for investment, people are looking for investors as part of the startup journey and all those things. What's your exit strategy is very early in that conversation. So over to you, Will.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Marcus, like, in your experience, would you say that the more attractive acquisition prospect for somebody looking to buy a company would be a company with smaller revenue, but with like rock solid infrastructure, versus a company with higher revenue, but is a bit of a mess?
Well, see, that's interesting. So I'm a CIBC preferred partner. And so I've been working with them on this very type of thing. So when you get into M&A, it's changed a lot in the last 5 years. So the traditional model was revenue based, right? The bigger the company, the more attractive the acquisition. In the last 24 months leading up to COVID and everything, there has been a very pronounced shift that it is looking more towards profitability over gross revenues.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah, because it's coming down to debt loading is really what it comes down to, because, you know, everyone carries a healthy amount of debt in a business. That's just part of that whole cash flow conversation. But yeah, a lot of modern M&A, a lot of modern investors are looking at how profitable is this company versus what is the overall revenue of the company. Right? And there's guys out there a lot more talented than me. Like, I'm not saying scaling up in itself is bad. There's just a really particular way to do it. And there's people that will come along that are way better at scaling up companies than I am currently. And they will see a smaller business that's highly profitable. And that is super attractive because they know when they buy it, they can explode with that and make even more money in their jeans at the end of the day. Because that's what it's all about. Whereas, you know, I've worked, I mean, everyone on this call knows who Sears was. And, you know, you do work with things like Sears or these other big companies that ultimately end up not making it because of the way things, remember we talked about being innovative and staying relatable, and they're just hemorrhaging so much cash flow that it's almost impossible to recover from. And you see that again and again. And it's incredibly unfortunate, but that it doesn't matter how big your business is. If you don't understand and apply this concept of scalability or profitability and systems, it won't last. It can't.
Yeah, and I would also that's really, really interesting, and it's not something that I've ever thought about in these clear terms before. So, like, thanks, Marcus. I find it very, very interesting. I hope everybody else does too. But and another thing I would say is, for a lot of people who are writing these books, and Marcus, you were taking issue with some of the sort of overly grand promises that some of these speakers are making and stuff. And I think that's just something for all entrepreneurs. And I say this as somebody whose main clients are entrepreneurs, but it's like, everybody knows this as a salesperson. You're selling a dream and you're selling big statements and big grandiose things. So yeah, beware of a lot of people's content that you come across that is promising something that means one day you will never have to work again. Or, you know, if you do this thing, your business will take off and you don't even have to touch it, and passive income and all this kind of stuff, you know.
That I agree. Like, sorry, I have to rant on
please.
Right there. Challenge everything. Like, even what I'm saying, even what we're saying, challenge it, test it. Get your own data. My quick side rant on this is funnels. Everybody is into sales funnels and, you know, click funnels and Insta pages and funnels. Now, is there anything inherently wrong with what funnels actually is doing? Some of the tools, no. Some of the steps in the process, no. This brings us full circle to what we were talking about, you know, the different pieces, Craig. They're all the same. They're just done in different ways. But here's what I can't stand about this commonly termed funnels. Now, if I was to say, hey, who uses funnels in this room? Everyone's going to put their hand up. But let me ask you this. I know a lot of you live in Toronto, maybe you don't have a car or whatever, but at some point in life, you have likely seen someone put oil into an engine, yes? Okay, so here's the process. They take the cap off and they put a funnel in, correct?
Yep.
You put the funnel in, you take 1 liter of oil. I'm going to keep the math simple. 1 liter of oil, I'm pouring it in, I'm pouring it in, I'm pouring it in. I pour that whole liter in, and 100 milliliters of oil made it into the engine. How satisfied are you with the funnel? So why do we buy into that for our sales and marketing? I hate the entire premise of the funnel.
I describe it differently. Will, do you remember how I describe the funnel, or
versus the oil into the car?
Yeah, my thought is you shouldn't think of it as, because I teach the lean marketing funnel and we talk about funnels all the time, and it's good to know. But I say you shouldn't think of it as a funnel, because if you know there's a funnel and you just drop in customers in the top and they're coming out of the bottom. Think of it as a ladder. Your customer's at the bottom of a ladder, and what are you going to get them to get to the top of the stairs, the top of the ladder, the top of the wall? How do you motivate them to take that next step? So that's my analogy, though we want to talk about funnels just because that's the marketing analogy and people need to understand where they are in the process and all that kind of stuff, but you need to approach it from a different way. Is how are you motivating the client to take that step?
Let's take it even further. How are you building that relationship? Going all full circle. But yeah, no, I agree. I love that. One in, one out. That's the idea. And it reinforces though what we're talking about, Will. Just challenge these types of things, because that's the big thing the last 18 months or so. Everyone's like, hey, done for you funnels, right? Just throw in those customers and we'll sort out the client avatar. No, just stop. Stop it. The only people making money from that are the people selling that to you. So challenge it. Start not buying into these concepts and figuring out what your own data is and where it needs to get to, and then get the help with those specific things. I mean, I have been to, like, I believe in training, don't get me wrong. I'm always attending other people's training. Craig, you know, I love your stuff. That's, and I love that, you know, we complement each other in that journey we're talking about for entrepreneurs. So I'm always learning, but I always make it a point to listen and have questions like Will's doing, always writing down questions of whoever the speaker is. And I'll go up and ask very specific questions. Sometimes they'll shake their head and laugh. Sometimes they'll just blow me off. But every now and then, someone will actually be like, I can't believe you thought about that. That's an amazing question. Why don't we get together sometime and discuss it? Those are the people that become my mentors, because they're okay being challenged. They want to have what they've bought into challenged as well, right? So always challenge things, guys. Don't just grow for the sake of growing. Have we said that enough?
Yeah. And I would add too, you know, talking about the sort of philosophical, emotional side of what does success look like for you, because that is certainly, I believe, a very important emotional and philosophical question of our day and age. Is like, you know, something is not working, especially in the developed world, where we think once we have enough money, then happiness comes, which is very clearly, and talk about data, empirically not true. From the developed countries, there's higher rates of depression, suicide. Like, these are real issues that we have data for. But then the other thing is, like, and I think this comes from Mark Manson, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I don't know if we can say,
yeah, go ahead, man. Yeah, I gave up on you a long time ago.
Right, yeah. Is the idea, I've been reading his blog for a long time, and I remember he said something really interesting a long time ago in an article, but it was, what are you happy to struggle with? Like, what is the work that you're going to enjoy doing? So he said he wanted to be a musician, but he realized what he actually wanted out of being a musician was the adoring fans, the stadium gigs, the girls into him, and the music and their Grammys. But what he didn't want to do was load heavy amplifiers and gear and drums into the back of a cold van on a winter's night, go to the bar, play for nobody listening, have peanuts thrown at him. And that is really what the job is. So understanding what the struggle of your job is and what the company is, that is something you have to commit to. So for me, I spent, I think, over $5,000 on a video course without understanding how I was going to market it, how I was going to make money off it. Because all I kept hearing was passive income, passive income, passive income. And I went, yes, that's the secret. I spent so many hours on creating the perfect video course and the scripts and the PDFs, and I designed it all myself. I can't even tell you how many hours I spent on it, and over $5,000. We have not even come close to making that anywhere near that money back on it yet. And it's just kind of sitting there on this platform, Thinkific. And what I realized is I don't want to be in the business of making this specific type of video. What I love doing is coaching people and helping people. I like making video content, but not the slog of webinars to promote my course and making posts to promote my course, because that's the job. That then becomes the job if you want passive income. It's not passive, it's very active. So what I would say is, figure out what it is that you actually like the struggle of and what you want your job to really look like. And then that's going to also help you figure out what is sustainable for you as a human being. So what I realize I can do is make video content and engage with people and do webinars and do this human to human thing. That is what I actually enjoy, even when it takes some work to get there. And that is ultimately about sustainability as well as what you can stomach and what you can struggle with. And then, to your point before, the only people making money on courses online are people who make courses about how to make money making courses online.
It's like the I shouldn't say this because I love Mike, but it's about the guys that teach you how to have a best-selling book, right? Through their best-selling book.
Right. Yeah.
But I do love Mike. So you did mention something earlier, and this is another big challenge I'm going to put out there. It's just how this evolves. This isn't even my challenge. My all-time favorite book that I've ever read for life and business is called Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And by many industry leaders, it's considered the original self-help or business development book, whatever you want to call it. It's old. It's old, and it's gone through so many revisions. And what they do, if you listen on Audible or whatever, they'll have commentary. Like, so they'll read the book, and then they'll have a separate commentary of what their updated opinion is and why it still holds true. And nothing in that book has not held true in like the 100 years it's been out or whatever it's been. And the very premise of that book is what fascinates me, is that we are by default wired for happiness and wired for success. And that we aren't ourselves, the brain isn't a machine or whatever, but there's all these little types of machines within us that are from birth designed to bring happiness, because we are, and bring success. And then it's amazing that everything else we allow to come in gets in the way. And it's not just about mindset. There's a lot of very practical stuff in there. And that book is what started this entire industry. These kind of calls are because of that book. The way we can talk about things is because of that book. So when you talk about whatever's in your way as a challenge and that stuff you struggle through, listen to this book. It transformed not just my marriage, but it transformed my own business. And I listen to a lot of stuff. I'm always learning, like I said, but this book was one of the few things that fundamentally shifted me in a way that sucked at the time, because I didn't want to look that far inwards. But in hindsight, I'm very thankful that I was open enough to do so. So yeah, really powerful book.
And I'll just give my classic little pitch to everyone, not pitch, suggestion and recommendation, is really get to know yourself as much as you possibly can. Because for me, certainly, you know, business success, when I started my first company, I had no idea who I was, but I really still struggled with like, what do I want out of life and why am I starting this business? And do I just want to make money, or is it about the work or whatever? And then this is now my second venture, and it's so much more aligned with who I am and want to be as a human being. And the work is so much more in line with how I can feel good about myself and how I relate to other people and what I can really stand behind and say. And that just ultimately is a way, again, more sustainable mental endeavor to kind of be able to stand behind what you're selling, to not feel sleazy or feel deceitful when you're trying to sell your services or your products, because to really believe that they help. Ultimately, I believe that no matter how money focused you are, it always is going to feel better to really, really believe in what you're selling and that you're helping. And I'd say that a lot of work for every human being, but especially for entrepreneurs, needs to be done around who are you? What do you want? What do you value? How do other people operate? Psychology, and not just to sell to people, but to really understand them. And then, you know, the good stuff comes from there. So I believe mental health and basic understanding of human psychology, to me, is absolutely fundamental. It's one of the pillars of what I teach. So I would say to everybody, you know, there is quantitative data and qualitative data, and a lot of really important qualitative data has to do with your own personality profile and how human psychology works in general. So invest in some learning and some time on that, I would say as well.
Agreed. Oh, I love that. Like, truly seeing people as people is so important. MJ DeMarco, one of my favorite authors. So he debunks the whole law of attraction thing, right? And the way he says it is he has what's called the law of affection. You want to make $1 million, change the lives of 1 million people. Right? So it's serve, not sell. Anyway, I love that whole approach.
That's great. Yeah.
So I completely agree with you. I mean, feeling on purpose is really important. And that's something I do think a lot of entrepreneurs don't get. We all get sold that dream that we can, what is it? Live like nobody should, so you can live like nobody can. No, no,
Yeah.
Stop it.
It's all those Instagram, success mindsets.
Yeah.
At
like,
millionaire mentorship.
On Instagram, Will, we literally, when we see something like that, we will post and tear it apart in our own twist on it. Like,
Nice.
I'm so anti-motivational sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't, anyway.
What's your Instagram for me and everyone else, Marcus?
No problem. It's H2P Canada.
H2P Canada.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, since we're like way over time here, which is fine, I have no problem with that. Any final words of advice, and for each of you, how can people find you and find out more if they want to get a hold of you? So we'll start with you, Marcus.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I mean, for the topic we're talking about today, the easiest place to go is limitlessresultsworldwide.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me there. If for some reason you're unable to get a hold of me through that process, just reach out to Craig. We're great friends. We talk often. Yeah, so that's how you get out to me. Since this is my wrap up, Craig, you know I love you. Will, actually, you've become one of my favorite people in these things as well. I have so
Thank you.
much gratitude around the two of you just to be able to get on and have honest and real conversations. That's why I keep coming back. So thank you for having that type of format to things instead of some preconceived agenda. I much prefer just these real discussions. So
And before we do that, Marcus, we did not introduce you at all. We didn't talk about who you are.
yeah.
So why don't we, at in our parting words, tell us a little bit about your background and give us your website, How To Project.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So primarily we are a we are a project management company, mostly a remote project management company, which is why we've been so busy recently. As Craig said, you can find us at howtoproject.ca. In fact, we've recently relaunched and upgraded our 40-point assessment, which is absolutely free to give you some real insights across those 4 pillars we were talking about earlier, based on the Vern Harnish work. So you can get stuff right up and running to go. My experience, I was actually in digital marketing and I was a web developer for over 2 decades, slowly got into operations and systems and project management and efficiencies and all of this stuff by accident. And when transitioning out of my career into my full-time job, I did make a great ton of money my first year because I had a ton of revenue. And not understanding all of these things that I'm talking about now, my second year in business, I ended up in the hole a great deal of money and nearly lost everything in my life, my marriage, my friends, my house, like everything, because I bought in to what was being sold. So ever since then, I have pretty much gone out of my way to be as real and challenging, respectfully challenging as I can be, but I refuse to let anyone else go through what I had to go through. That's my mission in life, is to challenge this entire industry that I'm a part of, because I think it helps keep us all honest with each other.
Thanks. And over to you, Will.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Marcus, like this was so fantastic. I felt like just, lucky to be just on it and hear some of the great stuff. And, I always take notes, but not always this many. So that's really, really great. And I just think I love sort of being a part of this as a student of this stuff as well. And I really, really appreciate what you're saying about trying to inject some reality into this industry, because it's so full of bullshit, like a lot of industries, like a lot of people, like a lot of things in general. And that, again, to me, comes back to human psychology, why we feel the need to put up a front, why we feel the need to pretend we're more successful than we are or have more answers than we do. It's, for me, that goes to evolutionary psychology as well, vulnerable, feeling like if your tribe thinks you're weak, then you will be either banished or cut loose or attacked, and your resources will be stolen. So there's a real, I get it. And I don't judge people who feel the need to put forward this thing. But I think people like you, who are very clearly qualified and very clearly know what you're talking about, have been through it, have great actionable tips. Admitting these mistakes and talking about all this stuff is fantastic. And that's something I'm trying to do with my own work, is to be more vulnerable and be more real and authentic with what I struggle with, and not pretend to have all the answers. And yeah, I would just say, if anybody's interested, what we do is we help people create what we call a powerful pitch, which is the idea of not just as an investor pitch, but anytime you are talking about your company to anyone out there who can help grow your movement. So whether that's customers, whether that's partners, whether that those are investors, or just talent and people that you want to work for you, you are able to describe your company on video, in person, in different ways of communicating, social media marketing, the really compelling story that is emotionally engaging and really clear about why you do what you do. So that's what we do. And yeah, people can find me at Will Greenblatt on Instagram, Will Greenblatt, my name here at LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. Yeah, and just thanks for having me.
And your website is?
Outloudnow.com. We're working on changing that.
Oh, fantastic. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Check us out at torontostarts.com. This video and all our past videos are on there. If you want to join our book club, it's in the show notes there. I took in the chat room. And if you enjoyed this conversation and you've been part of our other webinars and stuff before, go to Google and give us a 5-star review. Again, the link is in the chat room. Really appreciate it. Thanks again, Marcus and Will, for joining us today. And thanks again for Paul for all the questions and hopping in, and everyone else for being part of it.
Thanks for having me.